Young and the Restless spoilers Fridays, full the 8th of January 2026. Diane had been circling Jack all morning like a storm gathering strength. Her eyes sharp with suspicion and her voice edged with a particular frustration she reserved only for matters involving Nicky Newman. She finally cornered him in the Abbott living room, arms folded tightly as though bracing herself for battle. Jack barely had a moment to breathe before Diane launched into her interrogation, demanding to know why he continued to place trust in Nicky when Nicky had consistently proven to be both volatile and unpredictable in times of crisis. She accused Nicky of hiding something, of giving Jack the illusion of transparency while secretly maneuvering with Michael Baldwin behind everyone's backs. Jack, who had been patient for as long as he could tolerate, finally responded with a calm but firm declaration. Nicky had looked him in the eye and told him she would do everything in her power to get Victor to step aside, to end this escalating conflict before it tore apart both Newman and Abbott territories. "And I believe her," he said quietly, with a conviction that made Diane bristle even more. Diane countered almost immediately, insisting that Nicky was too emotionally entangled in Victor's world to ever truly choose logic over loyalty. She pointed out that Michael was far more strategic, far more rational, and therefore the wiser ally to invest in. But Jack cut her off, reminding her that Michael's loyalty to Victor ran just as deep, sometimes even deeper than Nicky's. He didn't trust Michael's involvement any more than he trusted Victor himself. The tension thickened, and their argument spiraled into lengthy back-and-forth volleys that echoed through the room. The kind of high-stakes discussion that should have felt urgent but instead carried the same heavy monotony as a decades-old business disagreement neither of them had the energy to resolve anymore. It was only when Kyle came rushing in, breathless and clearly troubled, that the air shifted. Kyle wasted no time announcing that Billy was planning to write a highly inflammatory article exposing Newman Enterprises in connection to the collapse of Arabesque. The accusation would be devastating not only for Victor, but for everyone orbiting the Newman business empire. Kyle explained that Billy had already begun uncovering enough information to create a damning narrative, one that might sway public opinion before Newman Enterprises even had a chance to defend itself. "Victor has hurt us badly," Kyle said, a bitterness bleeding into his voice. Maybe it's time he finally got a taste of his own medicine. Diane looked like she agreed wholeheartedly, her expression lighting with something dangerously close to satisfaction. But Jack remained still, contemplative. Despite everything Victor had done, despite every manipulation, attack, or retaliation that had crossed their decades-long rivalry, Jack understood one universal truth: timing was everything. The wrong move at the wrong moment could ignite a war that none of them were prepared to fight, not yet. So he told Kyle to pull Billy back, at least for now. He insisted that if they were going to make a move against Victor, they needed airtight proof, specifically that Victor had indeed used a controversial software tied to Arabesque's downfall. Without that evidence, they wouldn't be delivering justice. They'd simply be triggering another explosive round in an already volatile feud. What nobody in the room knew was that outside the Abbott estate, Newman loyalties were sharpening. Nicky was indeed moving in secret, whispering with Michael, weighing alliances, making calculations Victor would never approve of. She believed she was protecting the family by negotiating behind the scenes, by reshaping the battlefield before the men tore each other apart. But she underestimated how deep Michael's loyalty truly ran and how far Victor would go when he sensed betrayal brewing. And buried somewhere in the heart of it all stood Adam Newman, quietly but fiercely pledging his allegiance to Victor in a way that would complicate every plan Jack, Diane, Michael, or even Nicky believed it could control. While the Abbotts scrambled to prepare their next step, the Newman Empire was already reforging its shield, ready for war. At GCAC, the soft lighting and quiet clinking of glasses should have made the evening feel elegant, but for Lily, it only sharpened the tension already gnawing in her chest. Kane approached her table with a tentative smile, holding a single rose as though it were a peace offering delicate enough to undo years of complications between them. When he presented it to her, she shot him a look half warning, half weary disbelief. She still took the flower, fingers brushing the petals as she admitted softly, "It's beautiful." Kane's face brightened with a boyish warmth she hadn't seen in years, and he confessed that spending New Year's Eve with her had made him feel young again, hopeful again. Like maybe the two of them were finding their way back to something lost. But Lily's expression only tightened. She shook her head, struggling to put the ache in her heart into words. "I'm confused," she said. "I let my guard down." The admission tasted bitter. She had worked so hard to rebuild her independence, to stand on her own, to stop letting Kane's presence tug her back into an emotional quicksand she wasn't sure she could survive again. She took a breath, steadying herself, before telling him she would be leaving town for a while to visit her daughter. "I just need space and time to clear my head," she continued, her voice thinning with the effort of keeping her composure. "And I need to get away from you." Kane's shock was instant. His mouth parted, his eyes wide with hurt, but he tried to hold himself together, promising to step back if that's what she needed. But Lily shot that down instantly. "No, you won't," she said, because she knew Kane too well. He cared deeply, but he loved fiercely, sometimes obsessively. And whenever she asked for space, he found ways to shrink the distance instead of respecting it. Kane, still refusing to let go, insisted that instead of separating, they should be spending even more time together. "If you're going to see Maddie, then let me come with you," he offered, desperation leaking through the polite tone. But Lily's patience snapped. She reminded him that their relationship had been exhausted long before this conversation, that they had been stuck in a cycle of trying and hurting and trying again, until the only thing left between them was emotional fatigue. "If I have to leave town for you to finally understand that, then so be it," she said, her voice trembling now not from anger but from the weight of years of disappointment. She added, almost whispering, that she was the last person he should be clinging to. Then, without giving him another chance to reshape the narrative, she said goodbye and walked out, her heels hitting the marble floor with a finality Kane couldn't ignore. He sat there for several minutes, staring at the rows she left behind, trying to understand how a moment that had felt like progress had unraveled so thoroughly. He barely had time to gather his thoughts before Jack arrived, a man with no patience for emotional messes, especially tonight. Jack approached with a purpose that made Kane straighten immediately. He didn't waste time. He told Kane he needed evidence, something solid proving that Victor Newman had used the AI program to destroy Arabesque. He made it clear this wasn't curiosity or speculation. It was a mission, and he was willing to pay handsomely for the truth. Kane stiffened, insisting he wasn't interested in Jack's money, nor did he want to become another pawn in the long-standing war between Abbott and Newman. But Kane also couldn't ignore the fact that he had resources, access, and insight others didn't. And after everything Victor had done directly or indirectly to destabilize lives and businesses across Genoa City, Kane couldn't deny there might be a way to uncover the evidence Jack wanted. "Maybe," Kane said slowly, "there's something I can look into." It wasn't a commitment, but it wasn't a refusal either. It was enough to spark a glint of determination in Jack's eyes as he left Kane to decide what kind of man he wanted to be in the battles unfolding around him. Meanwhile, across town at the ranch, Michael Baldwin pulled up expecting to confront Victor directly. He had come to deliver news, to navigate yet another delicate matter wrapped in legal strategy and Newman family politics. But instead of Victor, he found Adam waiting for him, standing outside with a guarded posture and an expression that told Michael more than Adam intended to reveal. Adam explained that Victor wasn't home, that he was at the hospital with Nick, who had suffered serious complications after the incident with Matt Clark. Adam's frustration simmered beneath every word as he recounted what had happened, painting a picture of chaos, danger, and a threat that still hadn't been fully contained. Matt Clark had nearly killed Nick, had nearly set off another wave of destruction through the Newman family, and Adam was in no mood to entertain subtle conversations or evasive half-truths. Michael tried to steer the discussion back toward the matter of the unauthorized AI program, gently probing to see what Adam knew and whether he intended to tell Victor. But Adam cut him off with a look sharp enough to slice the air between them. Adam asked directly whether Michael truly planned to approach Victor about the program, reminding him that any move involving that technology would have consequences far beyond legal boundaries. If Victor found out too soon, or from the wrong source, it could detonate every alliance holding the Newman family together. And Adam, unlike Nikki or Michael, had no intention of betraying Victor, not now, not while the family was fractured and vulnerable. "I stand with him," Adam said, the conviction in his voice as unmovable as the ranch foundation itself. Whether Michael liked it or not, whether Nikki believed she could steer the storm herself, Adam had chosen his side. And in Genoa's city, where every alliance shifts, every betrayal leaves a scar, and every secret becomes currency, Adam Newman choosing Victor was not just loyalty. It was declaration, one that would ripple through every conversation, every plan, every move the Abbotts and Newmans made next. Adam's certainty hardened into something almost ceremonial, the kind of loyalty that didn't simply exist as a feeling, but as a line drawn in blood across the Newman landscape. He made it clear that neutrality was no longer an option, that the town had reached a point where every relationship, every business arrangement, every so-called friendship was going to be tested by what Victor did next, and he insisted that he had already chosen his side. Then he turned the question like a knife toward Michael, demanding to know where the attorney truly stood. Michael didn't flinch, not outwardly, because he had spent his life standing in rooms like this, rooms where powerful men tried to turn principles into weapons, and he answered with the practiced steadiness of someone who understood how dangerous honesty could be. He framed his loyalty the only way it could be framed without triggering Adam's rage. He was always guided by what was best for Victor, because what was best for Victor had always been, by extension, what kept the Newman family from collapsing. But Michael also knew Adam didn't trust words, not anymore, so he offered something tangible, something symbolic, something designed to speak directly to the part of Adam that craved legitimacy in Victor's eyes. He took out the Roman coin, the one Victor had given as a friendship gift, and he presented it not as a bribe, but as a reminder that Victor's approval was earned, not owed, and that Adam was not the only person forced to prove himself again and again in order to remain inside Victor's circle of trust. The coin, small as it was, shifted the temperature in the room. It carried weight because Victor had given it purpose, and because Adam understood purpose better than sentiment. Yet Adam's reaction was immediate and brutal, because to him Michael's attempt at reassurance sounded too much like manipulation. Adam essentially made two truths plain at once. Victor might value Michael, might even be fond of him in the complicated way Victor was capable of valuing anyone. But Adam himself did not share that affection, and any betrayal, real or perceivable, will be punished with absolute force. It wasn't an empty threat. It was a warning anchored in the ruthlessness Adam had inherited and refined. Before Michael could respond, the door opened and Nikki stepped in, her presence cutting through the tension like a sudden gust that changes the direction of smoke. Adam, recognizing that whatever conversation was coming next would not include him, pivoted toward the hospital. Driven by the urgent pull of Nick's condition and by the deeper instinct to stand physically beside Victor when the family was under siege. His departure left Michael and Nikki alone with a silence that felt less like peace and more like the quiet before a dangerous decision. Nikki didn't waste time with pleasantries. Her question went straight to the heart of what had been poisoning the air between the Newmans and the Abbotts, whether Michael had come to help Victor destroy Jack. Michael denied it because he suddenly cared about Jack's well-being, but because he understood that Victor's obsession with winning had begun to mutate into something self-destructive. Nikki's eyes narrowed, and for a moment she looked exhausted rather than suspicious, like a woman who had spent too many years watching the same war repeat itself in new costumes. Michael admitted carefully that he had been trying to stop Victor in the only way he believed could work, subtly, indirectly, through quiet legal guardrails and strategic delays, by redirecting Victor's impulses rather than confronting them head-on. But Nikki's response was blunt because she had lived through enough of Victor's storms to know what survived them. Subtlety didn't work on Victor. It never had. It only gave him time to convince himself that resistance was weakness and that power was proof he was right. Nikki admitted she had even considered walking away from the chaos entirely because sometimes escape felt like the only way to survive the gravity of Victor Newman. Yet she didn't leave, and the fact that she was still here, still at the ranch, still asking Michael the hard questions, revealed the truth she rarely said aloud. She wasn't trying to abandon Victor. She was trying to save him from the version of himself that kept dragging everyone into the fire. Michael recognized the same impulse in himself, the same contradiction that made his role both protective and corrosive. He wanted to keep Victor standing, but he also wanted to stop Victor from burning down the town just to prove he could. He framed it as shared circumstance, shared responsibility, and more importantly, shared risk. If Victor was allowed to keep pushing, he would eventually cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And when that happened, the fallout wouldn't only take him down, it would take Nikki, the children, the entire Newman brand, and every person tethered to it by history. That was why Michael proposed they stop reacting and start planning together in a way that Victor would never see coming. He didn't suggest an open confrontation or a moral lecture. He suggested something far more practical and far more dangerous. They needed to quietly seize control of the AI program at the center of the arabesque disaster. Remove it from Victor's reach without triggering his suspicion, and bury it somewhere even Victor's power couldn't retrieve it. In Michael's mind, it wasn't theft. It was containment. It was an emergency measure, like taking a loaded weapon from someone you love before they accidentally or intentionally pull the trigger. Nikki, however, had learned to fear consequences more than intentions. Her first instinct wasn't excitement at Michael's plan. It was terror at the legal and personal cost. She asked the question that always separates fantasy from survival. How did they get away with it? Michael's answer was the kind that sounded ugly precisely because it was realistic. If they were going to remove the program and survive, the story of what happened had to be clean, and clean stories require blame to land somewhere else. Nikki's mind went immediately to the most convenient mammoth one already drifting through Genoa City like a rumor waiting to become a headline. Cain. The guess came out not as cruelty, but as cold arithmetic because Nikki understood how the town worked. The public wanted a villain, and the powerful needed a scapegoat. She asked if they could really do it, if they could truly redirect the collapse and all the AI fallout onto the person who had, in one way or another, been closest to the mess from the beginning. Michael didn't promise it would be easy, but he didn't deny the possibility either. He spoke like a man building a legal labyrinth in his head, calculating how to shape evidence, how to position timelines, how to take the town's existing suspicions and sharpen them into certainty. The plan, as it began to form between them, was not simply about hiding a program. It was about rewriting a narrative before Victor wrote it in blood. Nikki's posture shifted, a spark of grim focus replacing the earlier exhaustion, because even if she hated what they were contemplating, she recognized the stakes if they didn't control the story. Victor would, and Victor's stories always ended with someone else paying the price. Nikki demanded more, not because she enjoyed the darkness of it, but because she needed to know exactly what they were stepping into, how leverage they had on Cain. What proof could be manufactured or exposed? What chain of custody could be lost? What digital fingerprints could be reassigned? How they could remove the AI without ever letting Victor realize it had slipped from his hands. Michael, seeing that she was in, began laying the groundwork in careful, measured steps. The kind of steps that could be defended later if everything went wrong. Because that was always the paradox of Michael Baldwin. He could do the dirtiest work in the cleanest way, and call it protection even as it risked becoming betrayal. And somewhere underneath their plotting, like a heartbeat neither of them acknowledged, sat the most terrifying truth of Aladam had already declared he would crush any traitor. And if he sensed Nikki and Michael were moving against Victor, he wouldn't hesitate to treat them as enemies, even if they believed they were trying to save the man he worshipped.